As you guys can see from the title, Jadon Sancho has returned to Man United training. He's back. And I can't lie, when I first got the notification from Fabrizio saying Sancho appears in United training again, and I think United was actually the first one to tweet it saying Jadon's back in training. I don't know why. Maybe I was kind of like tired or something. I was like, oh, okay. Like, player comes back to this club after a loan. But it's actually been so long, or at least it feels so long, that Jadon Sancho refusing to play for Erik Ten Hag and being basically banned from team premises, from first team premises, and then being shadow banned to Dortmund. It feels so long ago. Honestly, it feels like a lifetime ago. So it was really only until Fabrizio posted the tweet, the second one, basically disclosing the situation, that I remembered, oh wait, oh yeah, that happened. Sancho and Erik Ten Hag had a huge fight. Sancho wasn't selected for a game. He then came out and wrote a Twitter statement, and then Erik Ten Hag said that he's not going to appear for the club until he apologizes to me. I completely forgot that happened. Here's obviously the quote from Fabrizio Romano, his tweet. He says, breaking, Jadon Sancho held positive face-to-face meetings with Erik Ten Hag this week, and they've clarified the situation. Both Erik Ten Hag and Sancho agreed to draw a line on their disagreement and move on. Jadon is now available for preseason games, and he's now back in training. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this, chat, because if you're led to believe transfer rumors and pretty credible sources, Sancho has been shopped around a few teams around Europe this summer. Obviously, we know what's kind of gone down since he went to Dortmund this past season before coming back. He had a solid stint at Dortmund, a solid return. I wouldn't say it was like amazing. He had his moments, especially in the Champions League. That game against PSG, I think, was really the highlight. That was an incredible performance, but I think we'd be being disingenuous here if we were to say every game at Dortmund since he went back was like that game. I think it was a solid performance that was like a bit of an indication to show you what Jadon Sancho can do when he's healthy and confident. But I don't think we saw anywhere near the best Jadon Sancho that we saw in his first stint at Dortmund. And I think that, along with how much he's struggled at United, along with really the wages and the salary and the price that it would take to pry Jadon Sancho and bring him back to take him away from Man United permanently, a lot of money we're talking, a lot of salary we're having to pay. I think it was always going to be very unlikely for Jadon Sancho to remain or to actually leave Man United permanently this summer. I think it would have been very unlikely for Jadon Sancho to leave permanently from Man United. Not because he wants to especially be there, not because he's in particular a first choice option, but I just think that if any team really wants to take him, they're taking him now off 3 seasons of meh to solid form on wages that do not kind of like validate that. Let me tell you this about Jadon Sancho though, right? Obviously we know, well, most people know about the situation that happened with Jadon Sancho, why it all kind of went down. Let's actually speak about Jadon Sancho's history at Man United since he's come to the club. Sancho was bought by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in the summer of 2021. Obviously, after like over a year of chasing him, of wanting to buy him when he was at Dortmund. They chased him. I think they were quoted at one point 100 million by Dortmund, so they decided to leave it. And then a year later, they ended up buying him for, I believe it was around 70 million. And this was coming off that Euro campaign where he had one cameo against Ukraine that was decent, that obviously missed the penalty. Probably didn't come back in the greatest shape that summer as well too, had an ear infection as well. It just wasn't a great time for Jadon Sancho coming at the club. And I think a lot of people expected Sancho, when he joined United, to kind of complete a front line that had Martial, that had Cavani, that had Marcus Rashford. They had recently acquired Cristiano Ronaldo, and he was supposed to kind of be that right-hand side presence that United had been desperately missing. I don't think it ever really worked out that way. I think even Oli has come out and said, like, Jadon Sancho came as a right wing, but we quickly realized he was probably better on the left, which, what kind of scouting team does that kind of tell you United has? I think he struggled with confidence at times. I think he struggled with the game that United has really predicated on playing, which is a fast counterattacking style. The last 6 years or so, that's been the style United have really tried to nail down. And that's not a style of play that Sancho in particular really matches when he's at his best. Sancho, at his best level, this is a player that wants to combine. He wants to slow down the game. He wants to play more of an intricate style. And that really wasn't the way United were kind of playing. I think some people imagined that Sancho joining United would help them in retaining the ball and playing more possession style of play, but clearly that hasn't worked out. And I think, to be honest with you, if I'm being absolutely 100% here, I think that was very, very, naive to think that was going to happen. He is a winger. He's not a central midfielder, high touch, high volume player. But the fit just never really worked. Obviously, Ranić came in, didn't work under him as well either. And then Erik Ten Hag came in. And Erik Ten Hag started in preseason, if you guys can remember his first season here. It was Sancho, Rashford, Rashford, Martial, and Sancho over preseason. And United looked irresistible. I think Sancho scored their first goal in preseason. He scored their first goal of the season against Liverpool. That was really a three that were working. And I think a lot of people were expecting, okay, this is Sancho's second season. Let's see what he can kind of give us. That obviously never happened. And I think even more so the reason it didn't happen, as well as Sancho not playing well enough. And this is something with Sancho I'll always say. It was never good enough from Sancho as an individual, and you have to hold players accountable in that regard, especially for someone who cost United that much money. But I also don't think it helped when a direct competitor for his position on the right, and Antony, who was a former Erik ten Hag player, personally asked for by Erik ten Hag, cost a club record fee of £100 million, or what it was, £89 million, 100 million euros. All of that kind of totaling direct competition for Sancho in the form of a guy that was clearly Erik ten Hag's favorite. And I think with all that being said, it made it very, very difficult for Jadon Sancho to really kind of break his way into that team. Because whether Antony was playing well enough or not, or whether Sancho was playing well enough or not, you knew that Erik ten Hag was going to persist with Antony as long as he could, because A, it's his guy, he believes in him, but also when you buy a guy for £89 million or whatever, and he comes from your former club as well too, and you pursue him for as long as the summer as you did, as a manager, you have a lot of pressure on you in particular to make that signing work. And I think Erik ten Hag knew that. But to be honest, even me, I'm not a huge Antony fan. Not at all. I think I'm being generous even when I say that. His first season at the club showed signs of promise if you were like being absolutely just like the first time you were seeing Antony. Me personally, I've never been sold on Antony in my life. But if we're being absolutely honest here, from like a purely non-biased point of view, you had signs. I think with Sancho, right, even the signs weren't enough with him. Honestly, I think he really struggled to adapt to the way United wanted to play, especially in counterattacking. I think it really struggled with the pace of the Premier League. You saw a guy who had such high dribbling percentage numbers in the Bundesliga come to the Prem and be unable to dribble past players like Fabian Delph playing at left back. He really struggled in that regard. And on top of all of that, midway through his second season at the club, if you guys remember, he misses out on the World Cup in the winter. He stops playing for United, and then you hear Erik ten Hag come out in a press conference and basically say Sancho's going to be removed from the team. He's going to spend some time alone, and he just needs to work on his own kind of problems. I think it basically came out later that like it wasn't. I don't want to say he was suffering with depression per se, but clearly stuff was not okay with Sancho at that point. He wasn't in the right headspace, and Erik ten Hag, credit to him, allowed him the personal space and the personal time away from the team to kind of get himself back in the right headspace. If you guys remember, Sancho was unavailable for Man United for 3 months, which is basically an unheard of kind of situation. It's unheard of. You never hear of that kind of thing. Oh, he's not our £72 million signing a year and a half into his new club is not going to be available for 3 months. And you're not going to get any clarity on the situation per se, but just trust me, he'll be back. He did come back. I think there were times where he was okay. His first game back against Leeds, he was solid. I think he had a good game against Leicester as well too, a really good game. But for the most part, it just never felt with Sancho like it was going to get going at Man United. And then we head into his third season. He starts the year off in preseason playing up front, if you guys remember, scores that screamer against Arsenal. And I'm sure at that point, again, he's thinking, I've had a good preseason. I've trained well. A lot of these guys have been away from international break. Surely the season starts. Give me a chance. But again, start the third season of Jadon Sancho at Man United, and he's on the bench. He's not playing. He's third choice right winger, second choice strikers, second choice this. He's not in Erik ten Hag's books. And then obviously that game against Arsenal happens where Erik ten Hag doesn't select him for the game. After the game, they ask him, why was Sancho not selected? He says that during training, other players performed better than Jadon Sancho. Jadon Sancho releases a tweet, a notes app, a note saying Erik ten Hag is lying. I won't have people questioning my professionalism, I won't have people lying on my name. I feel like I've trained just as well as other people, but I also have to work twice as hard to get the recognition that others do, etc., etc., etc. A few days later, Erik ten Hag says Jadon Sancho, he will not appear for the club. He will not be allowed to play and train or even remain in my first team facilities until he apologizes. That's all we heard. Got shipped off to Dortmund. We know what happened there. And here he is today, back in training after Fabrizio Romano says, after a face-to-face meeting, they agreed to kind of draw a line in the situation and move on. I do want to say this though, right, chat? And I'm very cautious. I'm very cautious to keep my sources quiet, unnamed. There is Jadon Sancho's side of the story. And I've spoken to sources close to Jadon Sancho. This is no joking. This is where my journalism degree comes in. But all jokes aside, I have spoken to sources on Jadon Sancho, or close to Jadon Sancho per se. And there is a side to the story that, of course, it's a Jadon Sancho biased story, right? It's coming from his camp. But I also believe there are two sides to every story. And the story that I was told from sources is that basically, after the whole situation where the notes came out, what I was told, higher ups at Man United organized a meeting between Erik ten Hag, Jadon Sancho, and executives. basically telling them, squash the beef. This is not a good look on the club. Basically, right now, apologize to each other and move on. Jadon Sancho apologized. Erik Ten Hag apologized. They shook hands, agreed to kind of move past it. Basically, what Fabrizio is breaking down now, I was told by sources close to Jadon Sancho, happened a year ago, immediately after the Arsenal game. And Jadon Sancho and Erik Ten Hag left that meeting, having shaken hands, having apologized or whatever, and Jadon Sancho assuming that in that moment, it was going to be like, let bygones be bygones. We move past it. The next day, again, according to sources, Erik Ten Hag comes out to his press conference and says, Jadon Sancho will not allow to play or be in my training facilities until he apologizes. Jadon Sancho feels taken aback and says, I was under the impression that if I apologized to you in private, which was what was agreed upon on the point, that was it. But Erik Ten Hag is now demanding a public apology. Jadon Sancho refused to give a public apology because he believed that he was kind of lied to. The rest is history. So that's the other side of the story. That's what I've been told by sources close to Jadon Sancho's camp. Obviously, will we ever find out the real story? It's going to be a my word versus his word. So probably not. But I do think that it's very interesting that now, a year later, this conversation is now being said is taking place at this point. Because here's the reality, right? There's numerous reasons why Jadon Sancho is back in training. Could it be that him and Erik Ten Hag just decided that, you know what, it's for the good of everyone, let's return and let's try this thing again? It's very possible. It is very possible. Maybe Erik Ten Hag decided over the summer, look, I'm ready to ditch this Antony experiment. In fact, you saw towards the end of the season, he even stopped playing Antony altogether. And maybe he decided that I want to give Jadon Sancho another try. That is possible. Is it probable? I don't believe so. I don't believe that's the reason why Jadon Sancho and Erik Ten Hag have decided to publicly declare that they are willing to continue working with each other again. Is it possible that Jadon Sancho now all of a sudden has a sudden hunger and desire to return to United and win back his place and rekindle his United career? It is possible. It's very possible. Is it probable? Not in my eyes. Not in my eyes. I don't think the situation for Jadon Sancho has changed whatsoever since he went to Dortmund. Look, argument that they had or not, training bust up that they had or not, notes app that they had or not, even before all that happened, Jadon Sancho was not in favor at Man United. There are numerous winger options that are kind of viewed as priorities over him, whether you like it or not. Erik Ten Hag clearly has a profile of winger that he's going for that doesn't pertain to Jadon Sancho, like it or not. And I find it very hard to believe that in 6 months, Erik Ten Hag's view of what a winger for Man United should be has completely changed. I find it very hard to believe that Jadon Sancho is going to come to United again and all of a sudden completely changes the way he plays. I find that very hard to believe. So I don't think it's a case of, Jadon Sancho considers that or thinks that there's another chance he could make it at United. I don't think that's the case. I think there's numerous things at play here. I think first and foremost, I think Jadon Sancho thought that he was going to outlast Erik Ten Hag. This is just my personal opinion now, right? I gave you what my source had told me. This is not just my personal opinion. I believe that when Jadon Sancho made the kind of chose his fate at the time, decided to leave, decided he didn't want to apologize, I believe that Jadon Sancho looked at the situation at United, looked how bad it was getting. He probably thought that he was going to outlast Erik Ten Hag. I think so. Obviously, it looked for a while like he was going to because Erik Ten Hag looked like he was a dead man walking. But clearly, Ineos coming in, they saw the FA Cup, they see the circumstances he's been working with under the Glazers. They believe that he deserves another year or two to kind of work under a correct structure and get another crack at the apple. Agree or not, that's what's happened. So clearly, Sancho, if he had a plan to outlast Ten Hag, which I believe he probably looked at the situation and said, yeah, he's out of there anyways. Let me go with another manager and try and convince him. That's out the window. But more importantly, I do think, I state this again, Sancho's stint at Dortmund, his second stint was solid. It had great moments. Let's not act like Jadon Sancho lit the world up at Dortmund. Let's not act like this last 6 months, Jadon Sancho was a world beater at Dortmund. He had good moments, but he also had moments where it's like, well, he's not a 72 million pound player anymore, that's for sure. So if he wasn't going to come back to United, his only other opportunity was to leave. And I know there's been a few kindlings, there's been a few murmurings of Juventus, of maybe going back to Dortmund, but I think the reality is, chat, I don't think anyone can afford Jadon Sancho. I don't think they can afford the transfer fee that United are probably asking for, which I'm assuming they would like to at least recoup at least 40 million of the 72 they spent. He is one of their more valuable players per se. Like if they are looking to raise money this summer, he is one of the more valuable players that they have under the club. And then you look at his salary, 250 to 300,000 a week. I'm not pocket watching. I'm very happy for Jadon Sancho. I'm very happy that he makes the amount of money he is. I will never be looking at a young man making that amount of money. More power to you. But he makes 250,000 pounds a week, and he hasn't performed to a 250,000 pound a week standard for the last 3 years. I'm sorry. Good luck finding another club that's going to willingly pay you that amount of money. It's very difficult. Does Jadon Sancho want to all of a sudden take a massive pay cut? Probably not. Why would he? Does Man United all of a sudden want to have to pay money to remove Jadon Sancho from their premises when already they're as cash-strapped as they reportedly are? Not likely. So what's the most likely situation? What's the most likely solution? Probably what's happening in front of our very eyes. The club have probably yet again organized the meeting between Sancho and Ten Hag, laid out exactly what I've just said on the line. Look, Jadon, there's not many opportunities for you. Look, Erik, even if we want to sell him, we need to raise some money. Let's try and find a solution that works for everybody. What's that solution? One thing you guys will learn in any form of business, right? You cannot sell something to somebody if you make that something you're trying to sell look absolutely useless. Like if you have a broken pencil with a completely destroyed tip and the eraser is basically ruined and there's cracks in it, and you try selling that pencil to somebody, they're going to tell you, why the hell would I want that pencil? It's damaged goods. You don't even want it. But if you all of a sudden repaint the pencil, give it a nice tint of yellow, you sharpen up, you put it in a pencil sharpener, you make the tip sharp again, I don't know, remove the eraser and add a new one. All of a sudden, that pencil is more valuable to someone you're trying to sell it to. It's a bit similar to Jadon Sancho. If all of a sudden you have a player that you're not allowing anywhere near your premises and you're basically saying, I want nothing to do with this guy, come take him off me. Other people will look at you and say, well, you don't even want him, so I'm going to give you even less because you're trying to get rid of him. That's just business. All of a sudden now, if Man United bring Jadon Sancho back and he's training and he's playing in preseason, his stock is going back up. United no longer appear to have a desire, a need to sell him. This is how you get his transfer fee back up. This is how you get interested in him again. Maybe Jadon Sancho comes to United in preseason, performs really, really well, just like he's done, to be honest, the last 2 preseasons for United. He's had good preseasons. All of a sudden, it's a much more desirable asset that Man United are now offering to clubs. All of a sudden, look, you might not be willing to pay $250,000 a week for him, but right now teams are probably saying, we'll pay $100,000 and you pay a little bit more. Maybe he has a good free season. Maybe United kind of like glamorize him up again, and okay, we'll pay him $150,000, we'll pay him $175,000, and you pay the rest. And all of a sudden, it's a better deal for everybody on the table. Me personally, I believe that's what's going to end up happening. Because I'm sorry, guys, I don't look at this Man United team as poor as it is, and I still do not see a gateway, a path for Jadon Sancho to return to the team and be successful. I still think that the problems that have held Jadon Sancho at Man United and maybe even at the Premier League in general, they haven't just magically disappeared. Erik Ten Hag's still at the club. He's still his coach. He still has an idea of what he wants from his winger. He's still already coached Sancho and seen the player that he is. What's changed in the last 6 months? Personally, I believe this is all about raising Jadon Sancho's stock again and making United look like they're at least in a position of power when it comes to negotiations. That's purely what I think it is. Still not sure about having a non-starter on such high wages. Yeah, it's a myth. There's no way Triple QS that Ineos want a guy on £250,000 a week, not a guaranteed starter. No way. Let me ask you this, chat. Based on the last 12 months, actually based on the last 3 years, who do you think Erik Ten Hag would rather play at right wing? Do you think he'd rather play Garnacho or do you think he'd rather play Jadon Sancho? This guy wasn't willing to start Jadon Sancho over Antony. And now Antony can't even start over Garnacho. He's lost his burst of acceleration and he was breaking through. He also looked a bit overweight compared to before. He needs to be lean to be successful. He can't be a Hazard or a Rooney and play overweight and be fine. I agree, to be honest with you. I don't think Sancho has had many periods at United where he's really been in the best physical shape possible. And even when he is, I think this is coming purely from, like, in my opinion, I'm going to be very honest here, a casual point of view. But I look at Sancho and it's like, I feel like he either has to be really skinny, but then super weak, and then maybe a little quicker, but again, then super weak, or he has to bulk up or get a little bigger, stockier, but then he completely loses any explosion he has. It's like a really weird thing that he can't seem to find a balance between. Because I've seen Sancho since when he joined United to now. Like, I watched him at Dortmund. He was in solid shape. He was lean, but it's much easier at that point then to kind of like physically influence him into making decisions that he probably doesn't want to make. Where do I place the blame for 3 years of poor form? Because I can't even name 5 good performances from him. I mean, a few places, right? I think it's a bad signing from the club. I think they scouted poorly because to this day, I still don't know whether Jadon Sancho performs best on the right and on the left. And I think they bought him for that much money. You have to have in your mind what kind of specialist player that guy can be. And then I look at him as well too. I just don't think he's ever done enough at Man United. Like, the fit isn't great either. Like, don't get it twisted. A lot of big players flop at United. He's not the first. Hopefully he's the last. Well, I mean, he hasn't been the last. There's been guys after him that have flopped as well too. So in that regard, look, I get it. It's not an easy place to come in. The route for development isn't ideal at United. But I also think Jadon Sancho has never done enough, never proven enough during games to even kind of like give you an inclination to back him. The amount of times he's replicated a top performance at Dortmund in United kits, you can probably count on one hand. And I tell you guys all the time, I'm big on accountability. And I can't lie, the people I spoke to, or the guy that I spoke to about Sancho, he even told him himself, Sancho is very aware that he could have done things very differently at United, and especially he could have done things very differently in the way he handled the Ten Hag thing. Like, Sancho, I'm very certain, regrets making that note, even before this. At the end of the day, it's a pride thing. But yeah, Sancho will probably tell you himself, there are definitely regrets that he's had in these 3 years at United, for sure.